If they go further and say, well, the problem of evil, that is our argument against God. And by the way, most atheists do posit the problem of evil as the number one fundamental argument against God's existence.
Again, like we said at the very beginning of this, I totally disagree. I think the problem of evil would disprove one particular aspect of God. And if that aspect of your God is fundamental to the definition of your God, then I feel like that means that your God doesn't exist. So I guess in an indirect way, it can prove that a God doesn't exist by way of not adhering to, by way of that God not actually containing the properties that is claimed by his adherents. But I would say that the problem of evil definitely disproves an omnibenevolent God, because if the problem of evil is a problem, which it is, as far as religion goes, then if your God is supposedly omnibenevolent, all good all the time, and all the time he's good, then that means that he's not that. And so that's how I kind of navigate through that. I have never used the problem of evil as a direct as evidence directly against God's existence, just merely, pointing out the problems with certain definitions of God.
So let's analyze this, and we have analyzed this, and from an Islamic perspective, as we presented many times before, and there's several videos on my channel too, that the problem of evil isn't really a problem for Islam. For one, the best the problem of evil could do is it can assert that this God, this creator, is an evil being. That's the best they can do. So even from the beginning, the argument does not logically conclude that God does not exist.
Unless your God categorically not being evil or not being able to be evil is integral to his definition, then it definitely means that God doesn't exist, at least by that definition. Now, may that God, may a similar God exist that just doesn't include that? Maybe. But then, you could pull out other problems with the definition of God and how our reality works. But the whole problem of evil thing, showing that God is evil, is really only used to disrupt this notion that God is the moral foundation of reality, or that God is the ultimate good. God can do no wrong. If that's part of your theology, if that's part of your definition of God, then the problem of evil is definitely poisonous to your particular idea of God.
That is not the only conclusion there, or the most sound conclusion. The most sound conclusion is, okay, if the argument, if we are to accept it, acknowledge it momentarily, the best they can do is say that this God, this creator, is evil. So immediately, it's not an argument that, fundamentally destroys the idea that God exists. Secondly, from an Islamic perspective, we know, well, this problem of evil it may be a predicament that human beings experience, evil and suffering. It's something difficult, but it doesn't also necessarily follow that because evil exists and God exists, therefore God is evil. Why?
Well, hold on. It's not just that evil exists, therefore God exists. It's what relation does God have with these evil actions in our reality? If your God is allowing this needless suffering to happen, then it kind of dispels any notion that your God is like good in any kind of way, because any good being or any good person is going to want to stop needless suffering in whatever form it comes in. God being the most powerful being in the universe, he is the thing that created our universe and has a hand in our universe and guides our universe and has carved out a path for everything that happens in our world. Then he has carved out paths that lead to evil. And so because he apparently can't figure out a way around that, because he can't figure out a way to create a world without evil, it doesn't make him evil, but it definitely makes him apathetic to the suffering of human beings. And if he's apathetic to the suffering of human beings, then how can he be a good God? How can he be seen as the moral foundation of all reality? How can he be seen as the moral patriarch or the moral standard by which we should all gauge our actions? The problem of evil has far-reaching implications other than just whether or not God exists. So, I mean, if your God, your particular definition of God doesn't include the omnibenevolence or this, God is good all the time and all the time.
God is good.
Then it seems to me like you just have a completely different definition of God than the problem of evil is used against.
Now, let me just share some points with you from an Islamic perspective. Number one, let's start with the simplest point, which is God tells us in the Quran, in Surah Mulk, that He created life and death to test which of us is best in deeds. So life is a test from the Islamic paradigm. It's not supposed to be paradise. And tests, by their very nature, are not supposed to be easy. Tests are supposed to be difficult. Consider any test you've done in your life, any exam you've sat in your life. Never easy. Tests, by their very nature, are supposed to be difficult. So we will be tested, we will be challenged, we will face suffering and tribulations and trials in our life.
Yeah, but I mean, typically, you can accomplish that without needless suffering. If the Islamic God is the one true God, then you could definitely do without a lot of the needless suffering that we see in the world today. I mean, you've got kids that are dying of hunger. How is that a test by God? Like, to watch a child slowly die because they don't have any food to eat. That's evil shit right there. If anything's going to prove that God is evil, it's God sitting back and watching children die every single day of hunger. Like, that's just horrible right there. Not to mention the whole, pedophilia problem in churches and every place like that, like in those particular religious institutions. I mean, God doesn't have to create a world in which that happens. Any kind of test that you think God is putting those kids through in those situations, it can be accomplished in any other way other than having Father McFeely stuff them in the rectory. It really doesn't require that. So if God is all knowing, if God is a supreme being, if He's just so fantastical, then He doesn't have to test us with needless suffering. And that's the issue with the problem of evil then.